Between his defeats at Dalan Baljut around 1187 and his campaign against the Tartars in 1196, Temujin's exact whereabouts are unknown. None of the sources depict clearly what he was up to, and at this point in his life, and for a man like him, it's very unlikely he was just sitting pretty for 10 years or so. This has led to a number of theories. The first theory is that after his defeat by Jamukha, Temujin just spent the next few years rebuilding his support, a series of events not particularly glamorous or interesting for writers, essentially just a repeat of the last few years of his life. By 1196, he's again at the head of a military force, so we know that he was doing something along those lines. The second theory is that our main source for his pre-imperial life, the secret history of the Mongols, is always rather sketchy with chronology, and the theory goes that it's just possibly even worse than normal at this point, and that the dates we've had to fill in using other sources were actually closer together, or just took longer than what we're figuring, and essentially is saying that there is no gap. Now, Paul Ratchnevsky has a hypothesis that the reason the details were left out in the Mongol sources is that, whatever he did, it was taboo to write or speak about, as it may have harmed his reputation later on. This leads to theory number 3, that Temujin fled to China for the protection of the Jin Emperor and spent years trying to curry whatever support he could. Now, this is not very far-fetched at all. Togrul Khan, Temujin's most powerful ally, had also been pushed from his throne around the same time as Temujin's defeat at Dalan Baljut, and he appears to have fled to the Karakai, the remnants of the former Chinese Liao dynasty, pushed to the modern-day intersection of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and the Chinese province of Xinjiang. Nomadic steppe leaders often looked to their Chinese neighbors for help when they got pushed out of power. If true, it would certainly explain Ratchnevsky's suggested taboo. Mongolian sources would not be very keen to mention Genghis Khan was forced to look for help in Jin China, a rather unheroic period for the future conqueror. Remember Abahai Khan? The Mongols certainly did. And it wouldn't look too great on Temujin to be hanging out with the men who captured and executed his distant relation. It would also explain his absence in the sources, and how he came into the service of the Jin in 1196. Possibly, he spent those years trying to get the attention of the Jin Emperor, trying to get a military operation to bring him back into power in Mongolia. The Jin, themselves descended from Manchurian tribes, quite understood the military effectiveness of the steppe tribes, and always meddled in the steppe politics as a result, giving support to whoever they felt would be most beneficial to themselves and keeping any one tribe from becoming too powerful. When the Jin and their traditional steppe vassals, the Tartars, fell out in 1195 or so, the Jin desired a military expedition against him. Temujin was their man. Him staying in China for some years would certainly explain how he got into the position to lead a force against the Tartars for the Jin so quickly after their fallout with the Tartars. Not to mention, it would certainly be an important learning experience for him, teaching him much about the Chinese that he would certainly remember on his next visit to China a couple years later at the head of an army. Temujin would successfully campaign against the Tartars for the Jin, getting some vengeance for the murder of his father by the Tartars, and gaining a very nice bit of loot as well. After this campaign, Temujin had enough power to reinstate his pal Togrul, giving him a share of the goods to put him back on his feet. Now, possibly as a slight to Temujin, who they didn't seem to have trusted very much, the Jin may have now given Togrul the title Wang, meaning prince. The Mongolized version of this is Ong, and it's this name, Wang or Ong Khan, that Togrul is often better known by. but again, it is very unclear, and he may have gotten this title later on. Anywho, Temujin was back on his feet by 1197 and was ready to take the fight back to his enemies, who had spent the last decade far less productively than he had.